In this video we'll be looking at the midpoint of a line. The midpoint, often represented using the letter M, between 2 points x1, y1 and x2, y2 is given by the following formula. So what we do to get this formula is we take the average of the two x values, so we have x1 plus x2 divided by 2 forms the x coordinate of the midpoint, and similarly the average of the two y values, y1 plus y2 divided by 2, forms the y value of the midpoint. So overall this is the formula, and it's really important to note that the midpoint is a set of coordinates. So you have an x value and a y value that describes the midpoint. So we want to determine the coordinates of the midpoint for each of the following. So for part A we have the point 1, -2 and 4, 5. So the midpoint of this line is equal to the x values added together, so 1 plus 4 and then divided by 2, and then we have the y values added together, which is -2 plus 5 divided by 2, and if you evaluate that you find that the midpoint is 5 divided by 2, comma 3 divided by 2. Similarly for part B, we have the midpoint is equal to the x values added together, so we have -6 plus -2 divided by 2, and then we have the y values, which is 1 plus 5 divided by 2. So evaluating that, we have -8 on 2 is -4, and then the y value is 1 plus 5 is 6 divided by 2 gives 3, so that's the midpoint of those two coordinates. Next we want to consider the point A, which is m, n, and B, which is 2, 4. Determine the values of m and n such that the coordinate of the midpoint is -3, -1. So we know the coordinates of the midpoint, m, is equal to x1 plus x2 divided by 2, then y1 plus y2 divided by 2. So if we substitute in what we know that the midpoint is at -3, -1, and that will be equal to x1, which is m plus x2, which is 2, divided by 2, and then we have y1, which is n plus 4 divided by 2. And now because that's a coordinate, we can equate the x values and the y values. So we know that -3 is equal to m plus 2 divided by 2. So to find m, we multiply both sides of the equation by 2, and we find that -6 is equal to m plus 2. Then if we subtract 2 from both sides of the equation, we find that m is equal to -8. Similarly, we have that -1 is equal to n plus 4 divided by 2, and now multiplying both sides of the equation by 2 gives -2 is equal to n plus 4, and then if we subtract 4 from both sides of the equation, we find that n is equal to -6. Therefore, our coordinate A is equal to m, which is -8, n, which is -6. Now, if we consider that point, we know that -8, -6 is somewhere around here, so that's the point A at -8, -6. And then we already knew that the midpoint was at -3, 1, so that's about here. So that's M, the midpoint. And the final point was at 2, 4, which is this point here, which was B, 2, 4. So on this graph we can see where A and B are and where the midpoint lies between those 2 points. So after this video you should be able to determine the coordinates of the midpoint between 2 points, and if you are given a point and the midpoint you should be able to find the other point on the graph.